Hi everyone, it's Carolyn here with some tips and tricks to help you feel more comfortable with the Chibi lights. These lights are so stinking fun to work with, and honestly, the possibilities and applications for card making are immeasurable. So I'm hoping that after you watch this video, you'll feel like it's something you can tackle without fear. It's really easy to do, I promise. So let's get started. This is the project that I created using my Chibi Lights kit that basically contains all of the materials that you'll need to create an LED light circuit. I've recreated elements of my project behind the scenes because I want the focus of this video to be about creating the actual circuit. So what I'm doing here is marking the hole where the light's going to show through onto the card base, as well as the bottom edge, so that I know what my boundaries are for where everything's going to go. And the rest I got from the Chibi Lights kit. So I've got the battery, I've got the lights, and then the copper tape that you use to connect the battery and the lights. It's pretty straightforward. So here I have a piece of printer paper and the battery that came in the kit, and I'm using that printer paper to just kind of fold around the battery and set it to the size that the battery is, and then I'm just going to trim off that excess printer paper. This strip of paper is what will ultimately hold the battery in place for our circuit. I adhered 2 strips of super strong double-sided tape to the back of our little battery house, and then I'll attach it to the bottom left corner of the card base. Notice also that I attached the battery house such that it opens from right to left. You'll see why I do this later on in the video, but note that it's an important tip. I ultimately placed the battery in the left-hand corner of the card base because I thought that the recipient would instinctively hold the card with their left hand to open it. So there is some science behind my madness here. So once that's attached to the card base, that's a perfect little spot for our battery. And right now I grabbed the copper tape, but ultimately realized that I need to do a little bit of prep work here. I marked the left side with a plus and the right side of that little house with a minus. And now I'm going to take a strip of my copper tape and I'm peeling back the release paper on that copper tape, and I'm going to attach the first piece to that plus sign right inside the little house, and I kind of fold that tape back against itself and make a right hand turn to go straight down the bottom of the card base, keeping in mind that those boundaries are kind of set in place for where my card panel is going to go, my image panel, so that all of this is hidden behind the scenes. So it's also self-adhesive. That copper tape is self-adhesive. So I just continue to follow that path, and ultimately I go from the battery housing all the way up to the circuit, or to the circle that I drew on there with my pencil previously. I'm just using my Teflon bone folder to kind of help me make that right-hand turn. And I'm going to use my scissors to trim it off. Excuse my scary hair there. Once I finish trimming the copper tape, I use the back of my fingernail and then a Teflon bone folder to smooth out any wrinkles in the copper tape and make sure that it's adhered to the card base well. Next, I'm marking a plus sign next to that copper tape to remind myself that that's the positive side of the circuit. Now I need to create the negative side of the circuit by adhering another piece of the copper tape to the card base. I start just above that circle that I previously drew with the pencil, and I continue toward the battery housing, making a few slight turns to get there. Remember that this is all behind the scenes, so no one's going to see it. It doesn't have to be pretty, just functional. Once I reach the battery housing, I bring that copper tape over the top of the folded battery house and then wrap it around to the inside. It's important to make sure that the copper tape on both the positive and negative ends will touch that battery. That's how we power our circuit. So once I trim off the excess of the copper tape, I'm going to use my Teflon bone folder again to make sure that all the wrinkles in the copper tape are all flattened and that my battery housing is in good position. And then I'm going to mark that negative sign to remind myself again that that is the negative side of the circuit. And now I've got my light, and I'm going to, if you look in the camera, you can see, or in the video, you can see pretty clearly there's a positive and a negative, and you're going to match the two to the light and the copper tape. So I'm just going to use my Teflon bone folder to make sure that that's stuck on well. And when I put the battery in and touch those two sides to the battery, you can see that it lights up. And I'm just kind of giving you an idea of how it will look with the card front on it. The next important step in building this circuit is to build a wall around the battery house. I'm cutting narrow strips of foam tape here, and I'm adhering them to the card base. I applied 2 layers of foam tape to all 3 open sides of the battery house. This is important because most likely you don't want that light to be lit all the time. So you need to layer the foam tape high enough to keep the top of the battery house from connecting to the battery unless and until you want it to. I'll share another little trick later on in the video that will help you actually prepare your card for mailing. So I continue to apply 2 layers of foam tape to all of those open sides of the battery house until the walls are complete. I don't remove the release paper from the second layer of foam tape, and you'll see why later on in the video. Once the walls are built, the battery has a safe place to live. The foam tape will help keep it from falling out when being handled. So I've sped up the rest of the video as I add 2 additional layers of foam tape around the remainder of the card base. The outside edges need to be the same height as the battery house so that when you attach the image panel to the card base, you won't have a big lump where the battery sits. So I continue to adhere the 2 layers of foam tape around the outside edges of the card base, making sure to stay inside those pencil-drawn boundaries that I drew in the beginning to show where my image panel will sit. I wanted to mention that the circuit I've created for this project is called a simple circuit. It's simple because it involves only one light. There are many other circuits that can be built and used in your card making, and all of the instructions to create those others are included in the booklet that comes in the Chibi Lights starter kit. They might be a little more advanced, but the payoff and wow factor that you get once you try them is well worth the effort. So when you're ready to get more adventurous, get that little booklet out and give those other circuits a try. Okay, so now it's time for one of those tricks I promised you earlier in the video. Instead of completely removing the release paper from the top layer of your foam adhesive, I pull it halfway off and fold it towards the outside edge of the card base. This allows me a little wiggle room when I go to adhere the image panel to the card base to make sure I have that panel square with the card base. Once I have it where I want it, I pull on those release paper tabs and remove them the rest of the way. Here's the other tip that I promised. If you don't want that light to be lit all the time, especially when it comes time to mail your Chibi Light masterpiece, take a small Post-it note or scrap paper and slip it between the top of the battery house and the battery. This will keep the battery from connecting to that copper tape, which means the light won't come on until you remove that Post-it note. Here's a still picture of what my circuit looks like behind the scenes. Again, it's not pretty, but it functions. I hope this video has helped you see that these Chibi Lights have many amazing applications to your card making. They really are easy to work with and add an awesome wow factor to your cards. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.